And
One.
welcome to another episode of Star 42 with Michael.
And Jace. Glad to have
You
you.
have to throw things now
I
every
do.
time.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
It is a thing. And we're on episode 19. We're slowly getting up there
I mean,
in episodes.
that's how numbers work when you count them in order.
Well, like sequential numbers. I mean, we could have gone binary. We could be at numbers. I don't know what would it be, like 1003, 110110 or something.
I think next time we do hexadecimal.
Good call. I think hexadecimal is the way to go, honestly.
Isn't that like 16 numbers into the counting system?
Yeah, you get into letters.
Yeah, I like it. Or we could do a base 12 system. Base number
Do that
systems are
too.
fun.
So earlier on in my nerd life, I was like in the whole mathletes things where you do math competition.
Yeah.
And I was never like super great at it. I was always like just above average in everything. Never super brilliant, never, low IQ, but just above average. I'm just above average person, by the way. And but I loved bases, like tons of bases. And I remember playing a game. There was like a Star Trek, like a story driven game or whatever. And there's a part where you come across aliens that have 3 eyes and 3 fingers and all this. And you have to like actually do base computations to get the answers, to solve the puzzle in the game. And the funny thing is, what you're supposed to do is go to the enterprise computer and say, convert this to like whatever. And I never did that. I just figured it out because I was a nerd. And then afterwards, I was thinking, like, as a kid, I'm like, man, this is so tough. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I was supposed to use the computer, which is perfect for talking about AI.
Well, okay, I have to bring up one more basis thing, because I also think bases, like numerical bases, are very cool and interesting. And the only reason
They are too.
I think they're so interesting is because we count to a base 10 because we got these 10 little meat sausages on the end of our hands, right? And I was reading a book that's by an author who started religion. The religion I'm not a fan of, but the book I liked, Battlefield Earth.
Okay, yeah, I'm not a fan of that religion, but Ron Hubbard is a good author.
Battlefield Earth, the aliens had 12 fingers. And so when they made their cool stuff, they did stuff in base 12. And there's like a whole section in the book about how like this stuff like is confusing to the human who was captured doing stuff. And they had to do base 12 math to like undo some things.
And that's what like this scenario in that Star Trek game was the same way as well, where the aliens had 3 fingers and 3 eyes. So everything was base 3.
Yeah, yeah.
But I find that game too. That was a great old game.
I think it's weirder when you get above 10 though, because we have to introduce new characters to the number set for me to understand it at least.
Yes.
Right? But that being said, there's a lot of things that's happened since we last talked. We last met with Pope. That was fun.
That was fun. He has, being a longtime ServiceNow community person, like he just has those stories that are like, yeah, I was customer number 9 and I remember Fred Letty was the SC, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
It also brings up kind of a good reminder of like, ServiceNow did not get to where it was, and Fred Letty, for example, did not become a billionaire overnight. He started something and worked, and honestly, he got really, he was really smart, really, really smart. But at the same time, and he was visionary for what he saw, but part of it was he just got lucky with the timing. And that's what a lot of success comes to. It's being prepared, but then when the timing hits right, you're like ready to go.
I mean, you're absolutely correct. And there have been companies like ServiceNow that come out after ServiceNow that have not had the success ServiceNow had. I have I track them because I think they're fascinating and I like to see
that was one.
Huh?
Wasn't there one called Dreamt? Some of the old employees created something that they were trying to be like, if ServiceNow was created today, this is what it would be like, but it never caught on.
Well, it was acquired.
Was it really?
Yeah. So I don't know if I'd say it wasn't a success, but success can be measured different ways by different people, right? If you're the maker of it, then maybe those guys are very content with that acquisition. I don't know the specifics because it wasn't bought by a company that was traded, so that they didn't have to share that data. But
good for them if they made some, bank out of it. Like, I tried it, like, because they had some free demo environments earlier on. And, the thing with ServiceNow is like when I got into it, tried it, everything just clicked. It all made sense. I'm like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I have yet to ever have that experience with any other technology since. I've not hit something where I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense to me. Look what I could do. And maybe that'll never hit me again either. So
it's true. Who knows? That's for sure. I definitely
that's the thing.
don't.
The only thing I know is Queen of the Stone Age. They know, and it's the fact that no one knows. There's a song called that. You can look it up.
I will look it up.
I don't think I can play it.
No, don't play it. There'll be bad repercussions because of that.
I think you can play like a short clips of things.
I don't know. I wouldn't even tempt
Let's not do it though, because no one knows.
No one knows.
Great. So that's a song from the definitely Gen X, I think, 90s or maybe early 2000s.
Oh, see, I'm not good at remembering songs or titles and that stuff until I actually hear part of it. But
I usually don't remember the titles much, but in my 20s, that was one of the songs on my playlist on my Samsung Uproar phone that I had at the time, which was the first phone to have a built-in MP3 player. An hour's worth of music. And I thought I was the coolest person ever.
Did you know that old style MP3 players that are disconnected are making a comeback right now?
I saw something in the news feed and I was just like, oh man, I wish I still had my Diamond Rio PMP 300, which I think was like the first MP3 player that came out.
People are buying vintage MP3 players and making them work with modern tech and making them work offline.
This is a great topic that we did not plan on going to.
No, we did not. But it's so
everyone,
interesting.
So Jace and I, we work full time. We've got kids. I'm buying and selling a house. Everything's crazy busy right now. Work's crazy busy. AI's crazy busy. Everything's busy. So when we get on these podcasts, either A, we're like, we'll just shoot from the hip, or B, maybe we'll spend at most 5 minutes figuring out maybe what to talk about. And retro tech was not anything that came up for us to talk about.
Yeah.
But that is interesting. Retro tech is like making a comeback.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so fascinating. Like I want to get one just so I can say I have one. And it kind of plays into like I've been home labbing more, like messing my whatever. And I decided to I've been having trouble with it's just out of frame. There's an old computer I have over there. It's a Asus motherboard with an AMD chip on it from 2011. I upgraded the memory on it, the RAM. It's DDR3, so the RAM is very inexpensive, unlike DDR4, DDR5, which is like 10 times what it costed, a year ago.
Yeah.
But everything I try to install on it, it's like, oh, this isn't supported because this chipset isn't on here, and you have to build from source. And when I say it, I'm talking about like my personal AI things. I'm like, why doesn't this work? Help me make this work. And it's like, oh, we can do that. Let's just SSH on there and build it from the source code. And it does, and it works for a minute. Then it falls over because some other dependency has some other thing that doesn't work with that chipset.
It's amazing where I'm finding the same thing. You can go to AI and ask it these questions, and it can do very technical things and give you answers. That has kind of reignited the idea of development. And I think you brought this up some episodes ago where it's like, oh, I'm kind of back into software development now because AI could do a lot of it for me that traditionally took a lot of time of having to research and play and figure it out, just the technique, let alone applying it to your project, right? And now AI can really shorten that. And it's also the same thing like your home lab, which kind of makes it almost fun again, right? Like, because now you can get past these barriers that made it painful.
It's like learning the stuff that is the boring bits to have the fun parts, right?
Yes.
Like, I do not want to make code from source. I don't want to go and download
Honcho. I don't want to compile stuff.
And like compile the parts that don't work, identify the parts that don't work, and then see if it in fact does work. Like, I want to just test out their software, right?
And to me, that's kind of one of the reasons why, like, I've always dabbled in Linux, but I've never like gone full into it to say, hey, I'm just going to have a Linux computer.
I'm 100% in.
I know you're 100% in. I know you are. And I think there's good value to that as well. But every time I would start to like have to install something with Linux, I'm like, why can't you just have one thing that I click on and it just installs? Why do I have to go to multiple different repositories or put in command lines to load packages? When Apple and Windows has this figured out, and so I never went 100% in like you, but I have noticed Linux is really now starting to pick up, especially I think because it's heavy in the AI portion. I feel like AI stuff runs better in Linux than Windows. As simple as that.
I think there's two parts of that. It's heavy it's heavy on support of AI, but also you have to opt in to get AI on your machine. It's not forced on your throat.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right? Like when I want to interact with AI, it's on my terms. I don't have to question whether or not Microsoft put it there.
Oh, that's a good point.
Which is so refreshing.
This leads into it like another good segment we kind of talked about with AI.
It did.
First of all, what's your feeling on like getting burnt out on just AI in general as a topic?
So, I mean, there's two parts of that, right? There's three parts of that, right? There's the personal, like I'm developing stuff with AI and on AI, and I'm having a blast.
Yes,
right?
Agree.
And then there's the news of like what's happening with AI and like all this stuff, and like there's so much hype still around it, and there's some value to it. I'm not trying to say that there isn't, but if it's out there, it hasn't been realized. And then there's a third part where it's just like, I just want to do shit. Like, just let me build. I don't want to worry about the hype, and I want to have fun. Like, don't get in my way, right? And so I am getting tired of some of that stuff, but I'm just ignoring more of it now.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Like I've been messing with local, and not anything really with a purpose, but like messing with local models, seeing what it can do, and running it on an old computer, and trying to my side project of this like browser plugin stuff that I haven't worked on in a while because various stuff going on. But from a tinker perspective and tech perspective, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
But then to your point, I am so tired of I'm getting burned out specifically on hearing anyone who's talking about AI taking over the world and fears of AI. Because,
oh my gosh, fear talk is the worst talk.
It is the worst. Because once again, I tell people, look, and we were just talking about this before we started recording, AI is nothing more than probability. And it's crazy where you give it a prompt of stuff. It reads that prompt, breaks it down into tokens. I don't know if it tokens 4 or 5 characters, but breaks it down in these tokens, and then runs probability based on what you said and then what you're kind of expecting is the output. That's all it is. And that output is going to be based on the models from whatever it was trained on.
If anybody listening wants to read more into it, Google Markov's, Markov, Markov's chain.
Okay, Markov's chain, there you go.
Yeah.
And I have to put some links into like some good content I found to describe like what transformers are and models and the thinking. But all it is the probability of how these words are related to each other.
Right.
And the amazing part, and Jason and I were talking about this earlier in our 5 minutes of prep, it's kind of weird where you can, just on that probability, you can ask it questions that helps give you logic and insight that doesn't make sense that it works the way that it works.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you feed it data that says AI wants to take over the world,
it's like Reddit. You get what you put in.
Then when you say things to AI like, I'm going to disable you, it's going to look at its past model and be like, oh, I'm supposed to want to live, so now let me do things to make sure you don't turn me off. But that's just because we fed it that.
Or that could also be because of all of the sci-fi movies that have been transcribed.
Everything.
Right. I mean, but who knows, right? It's impossible to like really understand how it knows that the best next statistical thing is.
Exactly. And
unless you work with really, really small models. There's a guy named Anders Fish now. I can never say his last name. I always feel horrible He's from Norway. He works for KPMG. He did a talk on knowledge on AI back in K20, at K20 or K21, about like building AI on top of ServiceNow. And like he literally showed how to install and write a simple Markov chains parser. And then you give it text blocks. And then ServiceNow's like backend would do the processing to make it do the next token. But it was
That was really cool.
very cool.
And I think I found a video from maybe Knowledge 19 or so of Fred Luddy talking about AI.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I found a video on my phone. I was at a fireside chat. It was with John Donahoe and Fred Luddy. And I had part of a video. I didn't realize I captured this at the time, but Fred Luddy was talking about the amazing things of AI. I'll have to find that video. Maybe I shared it on LinkedIn or something. But like I captured it because I was in the audience there.
Yeah.
And I was going through old videos and saw that now. And I hit upon when him talking about AI. I was like, oh man, I captured probably a great part of conversation from Fred Luddy. I'll have to look through my old videos, maybe just post it on my YouTube or something. But, people got to realize once again, this didn't just happen overnight. ServiceNow was investing in AI for years. NVIDIA, Jensen Huang. I remember reading about CUDA back in the early 2000s because I was heavily into gaming and I knew about NVIDIA, and they purchased my favorite graphics card company, 3DFX, which I kind of am now forgiving them for.
Yeah.
But even then, they were talking about using graphics for general computing, whatever. And at the time, I didn't realize, I didn't have the experience I had then to understand what went into AI and the power of it. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Okay, move on to the next thing.
And who knows if that's what they meant back then?
Well, back then, people were starting to kind of hack into GPUs already to do like heavy parallel processing, like in science.
Oh.
And I don't remember, there was a case where someone was trying to do it for like some maybe genetic sequencing or something.
Was that how folding protons became a thing? That project?
Maybe it was that. But it basically got back to Jensen Huang somehow. And he was like, oh, well, if people are using us for this, why don't we build an API or SDK or whatever so people can just do general computing on our processors? So, very much like a customer-driven philosophy to say, well, if they're using us for this, why don't we just make it easier for them so they use us? And, I don't know, who knows if Jensen was thinking about AA back then or not, but he was definitely thinking in terms of, well, if the market's going that way, what's that?
Let's meet our customers where they are, all of them.
That, and I remember even earlier on in the early 2000s, I knew this because we had gaming friends who talked about it. NVIDIA was not and is not a chip company. They are a software company that makes hardware to accelerate their software.
Oh.
And they haven't been a hardware first company for a couple decades. Because I remember back even in the early 2000s, late 90s, late 90s, a game would come out and a new NVIDIA, graphics card would come out. And the frame rate back then, you were shooting for like 30 frames per second was like the gold standard.
Right, because it's what you can see.
Yeah. And oftentimes new games would come out like Crysis. There's that joke, but can it run Crysis? They would come out that needed heavy, intense computing for games. And, you had to have a very expensive rig and high class software or hardware to do it. Hardware, I mean. And NVIDIA would come out and on the best NVIDIA chip, it would run a game maybe at like 20 frames per second, like with high settings. And NVIDIA would come out with new drivers and suddenly that would shoot up to like 35. And even back then, there was an understanding that NVIDIA could come out with new drivers that would totally improve, massive improvements. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've been incredibly successful as well. Is he's like, yes, they do hardware, but AMD / the old ATI, they were also doing graphics hardware, and it ran pretty similar. And Intel and AMD are starting to compete. And at the end of the day, I think Jensen Huang was very smart to know kind of a playbook from Apple. Yes, let's focus on the hardware, but we really need to have, if not a software versus hardware first mentality, we have to have an equal together mentality of them.
Yeah. Well, he definitely did something right. That's for sure.
He did. I'm a fan of his.
I was just reading up on the Intel side of this thing called Intel Arc. Have you read up on that at all?
Uh, the Intel Arc, you mean the Arc graphics?
The ARC graphics cards, yeah, and
Oh yeah,
yeah. That's
they're
kind
starting
of
to make.
crazy how that's come up now, because now that's getting more and more support
Yeah,
for the models and stuff. It's been about 4 years since they came out, but those are still pretty relatively inexpensive for the equivalent of the NVIDIA side.
yeah. The Intel Arc graphics are kind of amazing, where they're making waves in the lower tier and mid market for graphics.
Right.
They've also been pretty inexpensive for getting graphics card with a lot of VRAM, because people are realizing VRAM is really needed, especially for AI.
Yep.
And I know there was a new game that just came out. I don't remember the name of it, but it did not support Intel Arc. And some people were really annoyed. But kind of to your point, it's one of those cases where, you know, historically, AMD was a CPU company, of course. They bought ATI. So they had the graphics and the general computing
Mm-hmm.
pieces to it. Intel, they kind of had some graphics of their own, like integrated, but they were never a heavy graphics company. So they were smart to really start to build out their arc, as more competitive for graphics. And a couple of years ago, NVIDIA actually tried to buy ARM Holdings.
Yeah, I think
And
I
I
remember that.
remember, and I remember then I was thinking, oh man, if they buy ARM, I'm putting like all my money into them, because they're like AMD. They'll own general computing and graphics, which is powerful. Now they didn't buy them, but I think, they came out with they just came out the new CPU chip that's built on ARM, like everything else is. And now people are talking about the new RTX Spark laptops of, hey, we now have a ARM based laptop that's now running games. And, you know, Snapdragon's been trying that for a few years now.
And ARM-based processors, I know now we're getting super deep in the weeds, but
We
ARM-based
are.
processors are so cool. They run so much low power versus the x84 chipsets.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand exactly how, but my understanding is the x64 chipsets are just way more complex, and they must
Well,
take way more power to do all the system
so
instructions that they have.
yeah, so for those out there, to kind of give you a good overview real quick. ARM is the chipset ISA, the instruction set architecture that is pretty much everywhere now. Your phone is ARM based, Snapdragon, Apple, Raspberry Pis, the CPU that's running the NVIDIA solutions. Yeah, exactly. It's everywhere. And the difference between that and the x86 older instruction set is ARM is based called RISC, reduced instruction set computing, meaning every time there's a clock cycle, because believe it or not, everything runs by clocks. Everything's time based. Every clock cycle, it runs one instruction basically at a time. So it's reduced. And then the x86 is called is it complex instruction set computing, where every time there's a clock cycle, it's running multiple instructions. So because it's running less per clock cycle, it's lower power, basically. And what they found is with the CISC versus RISC philosophy, and there's a great episode on the Acquired podcast that gets into talking about I think ARM holdings and stuff, and so it's great to get details with this. But basically, it's this: for most general computing, you don't need the complex instructions. The reduced will work fine, like 80% of it. So because the CISC runs multiple instructions per clock cycle, it's using more power, really not for a whole lot of gain, unless you're getting into that 20% threshold of computing. So the general rule is this: RISC, ARM based, is going to be lower power, more efficient for power, per watt or whatever.
Yeah.
x86, of course, is going to be using more power. However, if you need really high performance computing generally, you've always needed the x86 piece. Where it's really changing, though, is when it comes to things that require graphics cards, which are usually gaming and a lot of computing matured because of games. It used to be back in the day, you wanted like a gigahertz AMD or Intel to run your whatever game. Now that's not as important because now most of the performance is on the GPUs.
Or it's on the bottleneck of the CPU with the cores and threads. Because you have CPU cores and threads for how many things it can operate at a single time.
Well, at the CPU level, though.
Right. But then also you have the GPU stuff that's doing. You're right.
But the GPU is what's doing nowadays, hitting more of a bottleneck than the CPU piece.
Yes, totally.
Because when you're running a game, you may be using 1 or 2 cores at most.
Right. Unless they've written to run parallel, in which case,
multi-threaded, but
you can do other stuff.
But at the same time, I don't think there's as much advantage of running a game multi-threaded versus having just big beefy GPU.
Yeah.
Where the multi-threaded stuff comes into play is when you're doing a lot of productivity stuff like editing videos and you're multi-threading that with multiple data streams and elements and whatever. And that's one of the reasons why for gaming, AMD tends to run better for your games because they focus more on like single threaded performance with heavy like level 3 cache on your chip. And this is getting very technical. I'm sorry, people.
No, don't get sorry. I love it.
But your CPU has its own little bit of memory and there's different levels of it. And AMD said, well, why don't we just make our chips really great at 1 or 2 things at a time? So let's pump this memory in here so they're great at that. And Intel's approach was saying, well, let's get really good at multi-threaded stuff, which is why, when anyone ever asks me, because I'm a nerd, hey, I'm going to get a new computer, what should I get? My first question is, do you want to primarily use it for gaming? Or do you want to use it for like productivity and work? AMD is gaming, Intel's a productivity and work. You can still game on either one or productivity and work in either one, just know where your performance is going to be. But ultimately, the reason why, we can now really shift into the whole ARM architecture for gaming is because now a lot of the games power needs to come from the GPU. And once again, NVIDIA was really smart. When they were building their solutions, their AI solutions, they said, you know what? Why don't we just use the ARM chipset that runs more efficient at the CPU? Because that's not where the computing is. We need the CPU to run the basic communications and bridges, and whatever the CPU needs to do. But our big value with it is the GPU side of it and parallel processing, whatever. So it's fascinating when you break it down and look at it. So x86 has also gotten a lot better. Like they've come out with multiple cores and efficiency cores. So they're trying to be competitive with ARM. But you got to remember, when you go from like x86, like building something on an Intel or AMD to switch over to ARM, you got to redo all your software.
Right.
The instruction set's different.
I was trying to use something on that old computer and it required Bun. I don't know if you know what Bun is, but it's like a different kind of Node.js, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah. But Bun runs stuff that requires 2 instruction sets that are not on that AMD processor. So that's literally what kind of happens when you have a processor that doesn't support an instruction set.
Mm-hmm.
Then to make it work, you have to build the code from source.
Yep.
So that it can run on that processor.
Yep.
I wouldn't know that if it wasn't for AI help me though.
And once again, it goes back to the fact, hey, now that you've got AI there to help you with it, it's still more fun to tinker because you're not hitting bottlenecks where you're like, okay, I got to throw my hands up, I'm done.
Yep. Should we finally get to the AI piece more?
Oh God, yes, but we only have a few more minutes, I think.
We do only have fewer minutes. So I've been doing a lot of stuff. I've been home labbing more. I literally went out and bought 4 computers yesterday.
Define the computers you bought.
I bought 4 of these. I'll pull it out. They're older, but it's all right. Oh, I just got unplugged. Right? I got one of these things, 4 of these things. Cool. They're kind of ugly, old, whatever. But it's got an i5 in it. It's got 16 gigs of DDR4. It can do general processing stuff for me, which is fantastic. I am learning Ansible with it and setting up Proxmox with it and all that jazz. Maybe pulling some of my stuff off of the whatever. But I wouldn't have even thought to do it if I hadn't been like, hey, what of these processors can do what that computer can't do? Facebook listings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Amazon, I went to eBay, I went to some like local computer websites, and these were a steal. I'm like, oh, well, for $350, I can get 4 of these. It would cost me like $800 or $900 online. Like, you know what? I'm going to pull that trigger. Let's do it. Right? But I wouldn't have done it had I not like been because it was looking up the chips, and like I was feeding it like, oh, here's this computer, here's that computer, and it actually has tool calls to like look up the chips on PC info or something. Like, oh, well, that's so helpful, right?
That is where AI is helping so much.
And out, and I can't hear you because I unplugged. Oh, it unplugged on my headphones.
All right. Well,
technical issues during recording. This is totally intended. Can I hear you now?
Yes. Well,
yes,
I can hear you fine.
But yeah, it's so fascinating. So like last night I was up for like a couple hours installing my operating system and one on all 4 of these machines. I'm really excited to get an Ansible. Have you ever worked with Ansible?
I have not. Maybe I should.
Ansible is a way to, from one computer, tell a bunch of computers to be set up exactly the same way.
Ah, okay.
Right? You have to have Python installed for it, but that's like the only dependency. But then with like YAML-like files, you can say, okay, install this, install that on these things, on those things. Maybe you have like whatever. I counted, I have 13 computers in my office. 11 of them I can use. One is a work computer, one is not working. It was this one.
We can't see your video, but we'll believe you.
Oh, my video is broken? You can't see it.
I don't know. Maybe I can't see it. All right, we'll go with it.
Oh, anyways, I'm holding up Raspberry Pi Zero. That's unplugged. That's why it doesn't work. But
I've got a Raspberry Pi somewhere too. Like I've got a bunch of them.
But I've been getting, like you said, burnt out on this AI stuff. But I found this thing. You remember OpenClaw blew up, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you tried it at all. Did you ever end up trying OpenClaw?
I have not yet. I just finally got one kind of little project I was working on finally working. So now I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to move over to OpenClaw at one point now. Getting ready to.
I tried setting up and using OpenClaw 5 different times. And I gave up 5 times. Because I kept hitting a wall with like it having problems. There's another project that predates OpenClaw called Hermes by Nous. I've been using it, and oh my gosh, it is amazing. And the difference is this: OpenClaw requires you to find the skills or manually create your skills that you want to have it do. Hermes builds the skills as you do things with it.
That's exactly what people need, because I'm like that, where I'm like, you know what? Why can't AI just see what I do and then figure out how to automate that?
That's gonna dovetail into the last AI bit, which we're at time. But a couple weeks ago, we talked about Mila K from Fifth Element and how she created a memory system on AI that kind of blew up.
Oh yeah, Mila Jovovich.
Yep. There's another new internet celebrity, old internet celebrity who is broken into the AI space. He like conquered the internet and then he left, and now he's come back and has been doing some interesting stuff. His name is PewDiePie, if you've not heard of him. And he made a system called Odysseus, which is kind of competing with Hermes, but it's all self-hosted. Its whole point is, I don't like the big companies having all my data.
Yes.
And I don't want them to build skills based on what I do, because if I can do it, you can bet your bottom buck that they're doing it. And you can see the skills that these things are making. And it's like, well, what the heck? I don't want it doing that stuff. Anyways, I haven't tried out his Odysseus yet, but I want to.
So I know we're at time we have to talk about this more, but that's where I'm like becoming a huge proponent of the AI inference and running things more locally.
Yeah.
But we will have to talk about that topic next time, because we are out of time.
We are.
And so this has been Star 42. This has been Michael.
And Jace. Have fun.
Bye for now.
See ya.